Well, hello, welcome again to a read through of Romans, and I got up to chapter 2, verse 17. Verses 17 to 24 really form a subsection, and the style of this is in fact fairly rhetorical. We have once again this straw man that Paul has set up, a Jewish person with whom he's having an imaginary dialogue, asking rhetorical questions. It's a clever way of trying to get across his point. Plato, of course, in his writings actually sets up real dialogues between people and uses a similar kind of technique. But here we have a kind of straw man that Paul has set up. So, eidesou iudaios ep onomazde kai ep anapae nomo kai kaukasai en theo kai ginoskes to thelema, kai dokimazdes ta diapheronta, kat ekumenos ek tu nomu. Pepoithas te siaton hodegon enai tuflon, phos ton en skote, paideutein aphronon, didaskalon napion, ekonta ten morphosin tes gnosios kai tes aletheas ento nomo. Fairly long sentence here. So, but if you, now the ep onomazdo is a verb meaning either to bear the name of Jew or take for yourself the name. It's second person middle. It may have that sense of to take upon yourself the name. The term iudaios here, Jew, is to be taken in the sense of an Israelite here, a member of the Jewish race, the chosen race. So if you take upon yourself the name Jew and ep anapao, compound here from ep plus ano and power, if you rest in, literally, to almost rely upon, perhaps, or rest in the law, and you boast in God, and you know, gnosko, tothelema, literally the will, but in biblical Greek, tothelema generally refers to the will of God, and dokimazdes, and, well, dokimazdes is a funny word, it's often difficult to translate. Discern is one translation of this. It's to try something out, to put it to the test and check it out whether it's true or not. And hence it's often translated here as discern. Ta diapheronta, well, literally the things which differ. So, or it could also mean the things which differ in a positive way, the things which excel. And so the King James, for example, version translates the things that are excellent. So I think I'm just going to translate here. I think it's more the difference between right and wrong, but it could mean the things that are excellent. Kat a keo is a late verb. The middle bit's cognate with our word echo. And the idea of it is that in this form of instruction, the teacher says X, Y, and Z, and then the student echoes it back, so repeats it back verbatim. And so we get this lovely word kat a keo. It's an epsilon contract verb. It literally means to echo back, and then it comes to mean to instruct. It's cognate with our modern word catechumen, one who was being instructed, but it's the same word really. And this is the passive here, so it means being instructed, and then from or by means of the law. Pepoithas, well, trusting in, it's one of those verbs it is connected etymologically back with patho, but it's really a perfect in form and present in meaning. So it's literally almost having persuaded yourself, or trusting yourself to be a hodergon tuflon. This is a compound again with hodos of road and the ag the ag here from ago, to lead, so someone who leads you along the road is a guide. So trusting or having believing yourself to be, trusting yourself to be a guide of the blind, a light of those in skote. This is skotos, it's a third declension neuter, in darkness. Paideutein, an educator. Aphronon, of those who are foolish. It's alpha privative plus that frame root. So an educator of the foolish, a teacher of napion, of, well, it literally means babies. The roots are ne plus epos. If you put it into Latin, you get infant, so infants. So perhaps a teacher of the young. It's often extended beyond just babies. The roots are someone who cannot speak because they haven't learned how to speak yet, so they're infants. But then it just comes to mean anyone who is young. Having the morphosyn, having the embodiment, I think is a good translation here, of knowledge and of truth, which is in the law. So it's a long bit there. I'll just quickly go through that again, I think. So if you take upon yourself the name of Jew, and you rely on or rest in the law, and you boast in God, and you know the will, understand of God, and you discern that which is excellent or perhaps right and wrong, being taught by the law, and you trust yourself, you regard yourself as to be a guide of the blind, a light of those in darkness, an educator of the foolish, a teacher of young children, having the embodiment of knowledge and of truth in the law. Houn didaskon heteron siauton, ou didaskes, ho keruson me kleptein kleptes, ho legon me moikuein moikues, ho bedelus sominos ta eidola hierosoules, hos in nomo kaukasai diates parabasios tu nomu, ton theon atamistes. I'll just get this aligned properly here. So then, or therefore, it's you, the one teaching your fellow, the other, so your fellow human. Do you not teach yourself? The one proclaiming, me kleptein, do not steal, do you steal? The one saying, do not to commit adultery, so we're getting me plus infinitives here, do you commit adultery? Ho bedelus sominos ta eidola. Now, bedelusomai is a verb meaning to detest. The etymology is not, I think, particularly overly clear. The roots of this do go back into classical Greek. It's got something like connected with saying very ugly and unpleasant things, and so it has the sense of detesting. So you, the one detesting, it's middle here, I think, idols, hierosoules, literally, do you rob temples? However, it could also that was the original meaning of it, hierosoules. There is, this is an epsilon contract verb, but there is also a soulao, to rob or to ransack a temple, and there were, well, the word has that meaning elsewhere, some classical Greek, but it can also mean simply to be sacrilegious, so to commit irreverent acts against a holy place or something like that. You might compare the use of this with its use in Acts 19:37. You who boast in the law, you are dishonouring God through the parabasios, the transgression of the law. Parabasis, transgress is simply the Latin equivalent of this. It's parabasis. It's a third declension feminine abstract noun. It means the stepping over, as in as does transgress, the idea of going beyond where you're supposed to do, and hence becomes transgression. Just to do that bit again quickly, because it's a bit complicated here. So therefore, you, the one teaching your fellow, do you teach yourself? The one proclaiming, do not steal, do you steal? The one saying, do not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? The one detesting idols, do you rob temples, or are you sacrilegious? You who boast in the law, you dishonour God through the transgression of the law. Some people take verse 23 as a question, but it's taken here as a statement, and I think that's generally the modern held view. Toga onomatou theou dihumas blasphemetai entois ethnesin kathos gegraptai. So we have here a quote, well, it's not really a quotation, it's an adaptation from the Septuagint of Isaiah 52:5. Now, there, the Greek translation in the Septuagint adds in the words dihumas and in the words entois ethnesin. They're not in the not in the Hebrew that we have today in the Masoretic text. So the verse had already been somewhat altered, and then Paul makes further changes. He deletes from the Greek version diapantos, meaning everywhere, and he changes mu into tu theou. So it's an adaptation of a translation of something that doesn't quite agree with the Masoretic text. So, for as it has been written, the name of God is being blasphemed on your account of you among the Gentiles. That's sort of the end of this little subsection. And the next bit here, we have this peritome. Now this is slightly complicated. Paul uses this word and akribustia. Scholars call it metonymy. It means a movement of meaning from one word to another that's etymologically or conceptually connected with it. So peritome, it's from peritemno, to cut around, and hence it's the term used for circumcision, which is just the Latin equivalent again. The corresponding word, akribustia, refers to the foreskin. It's complicated etymology, the akra meaning the end point, and the buo is to stuff. The akribustia is literally the foreskin, and it can also mean lack of circumcision, and that's what it generally has the meaning here. You don't generally translate akribustia here as the foreskin, but rather lack of circumcision or uncircumcision. So he says here, peritome menga ophelei ean nomon praseis, ean parabates nomu eis, he peritome su akribustia gegonen. Now notice we have a min, and we've got a det down here to balance it. So for circumcision, ophele from ophelio, is of advantage, is of use, is of benefit. Aean, if praseis, you practice the law. Aean det, now there's the balancing det, but if you might be, this is a subjunctive from the verb to be, if you might be a transgressor of the law. Now we had up here parabasis, the abstract feminine noun. Now we get which third declension, we now get the first declension masculine noun formed from that, the transgressor. So if you might be a transgressor of the law, he peritome, well, it's going to mean something like, then your circumcision, gegonen perfect, has become akribustia, uncircumcision. literally foreskin, but we'll translate it as uncircumcision. Ean un he akribustia te ata dikaiomata tu nomu fu lasse, uk he akribustia autu es peritomen logisthesatai. So if, now here we're getting more metonymy, we're getting more shifts of meaning here. The akribustia, which before meant lack of circumcision or uncircumcision, it seems now to refer to be personified as the uncircumcised person. And Paul will use it in that sense later as well, when he talks about circumcision later in this same epistle. So I think here we have to translate it as the uncircumcised person, even though it's a feminine noun here. The uncircumcised person, if they guard or keep ta dikaiomata, that's the ordinances of the law. And it's a question here, now it goes back to uncircumcision. So will not his uncircumcision or lack of circumcision, will it not be reckoned, future passive, as circumcision? Kai krine he ek physios akribustia ton nomon telusa, se ton diagrammatos kai peritomes parabatein nomu. So that's here. And now krine is a future, you can tell by the accent. Original krine essay, and then the sigma drops out and you get contraction. So it's a future. So now it's literally here, he akribustia. So again, I think it's taking on this personification. So the person who is from nature uncircumcised, so the person who is by nature uncircumcised, this is a feminine participle agreeing with akribustia, but it's got to refer to this person. So if the person who is by nature uncircumcised, fulfilling the law, he will judge, and then the object of that is here. So he will judge you. The ton goes with the parabatein, the transgressor of the law. Now the diagrammatos kai peritomes may be idiomatic here. You do get the same usage appears in later on in chapter 4 and chapter 8 of this book. So it may have this, it's literally through the law and through circumcision, that it may have that modern sense of with all your law and circumcision. So just to put that bit together, it's something like, the man who is uncircumcised by nature, fulfilling the law, he will judge you, the transgressor of the law, and then we would say, with all your law and your circumcision. Something like that here for this idiom. It could simply mean by means of your law and by means of your circumcision, if you want to do it literally. But I think it's meant to be slightly idiomatic here. Uga ho ento phenero iudaios esti, udi he ento phenero in saki peritome, ala ho ento crypto iudaios kai peritome cardias en pneumati u grammati, hu ho epenos uk ex anthropon ala ectu theou. This is a slightly tricky verse here, because a bit of idiom here again. I think the ento phanero is idiomatic for something like outwardly, literally in the open, and then that's balanced by ento crypto, which literally in the secret place, and so inwardly. So I think we're meant to translate these idiomatically as inwardly and outwardly. So it's something like, for an Iudaios, the Jew, is not one outwardly. So for the Jew is not one outwardly, nor is he peritome, nor is circumcision in the flesh, ento phanero, nor is circumcision outwardly in the flesh. Allah, but the man is a Jew inwardly. So a man is a Jew inwardly, and the circumcision is of the heart, or the circumcision of the heart, understand, is en pneumati kai grammati, idiomatic here again, spiritual and not literal. So literally in spirit and not in writing. So for the man who is a Jew, for a Jew is one inwardly, and the circumcision of the heart is spiritual, not literal. The idea of the peritome kardias, the spiritual heart circumcision, this in fact goes back to the Old Testament. Have a look at Deuteronomy 10:16. Of whom the praise, epainos, is not from men, but from God. So it would say whose praise, the praise of whom, whose praise is not from men, but from God. Now there may be a little pun here. Paul may be not clear that his audience, the Romans, picked it up. Perhaps they did. If there were Jewish people there, they may have. There may be a little pun here because the word Iudaios is connected with, of course, Judah. And Judah in Hebrew simply means praise. And so there's sort of a bit of a joke here. Whose praise is, perhaps whose Jewishness is not from men but from God. And Paul says whose praise is not from men but from God. Maybe a pun here that scholars have picked up. And that is the end of chapter 2.